My name is Samantha Brennan, and at 33 years old, I discovered something painful about my own family. Apparently, my future had a dollar amount attached to it. The total came to exactly $98,600. Every single cent I spent 6 exhausting years saving on my own. I lived like someone permanently stuck in survival mode. I stayed in my parents' basement well into adulthood, avoided vacations, turned down nights out with friends, and survived on cheap meals more times than I could count. Every sacrifice had one purpose behind it. I wanted a small one-bedroom condo with a real front door and a lock that belonged only to me. Then one morning, everything collapsed in less than 30 seconds. I logged into my bank account to prepare the transfer for my down payment. Instead of seeing years of hard work waiting for me, the balance showed only $312.18. At first, I thought it was a system error. I refreshed the page 3 times before reality finally hit me. My mother had emptied the account. Not for an emergency. Not for medical bills. She handed the money over to my younger brother so he could pay for an expensive destination wedding in Cancun. When I confronted her, she barely reacted. She simply shrugged and told me he had found someone worth celebrating. Then she calmly added, "Your house can wait." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even cry in front of her. But 3 weeks later, a small white package tied with a navy ribbon arrived for my brother. The morning he opened it, he drove straight to my mother's house without calling first. According to the neighbors, he didn't even bother knocking before forcing the door open. Some betrayals stay quiet for years before they finally explode. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, the place where silence keeps records and underestimated people eventually stop staying quiet. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or treated like your sacrifices didn't matter, then this story may feel very familiar. The basement technically had a door, although calling it functional would have been generous. It was an old hollow wooden slab painted white decades earlier. The latch barely worked, and privacy simply did not exist down there. My mother walked in whenever she wanted, usually carrying laundry and talking about something Tyler needed before I could even answer. Meanwhile, I spent most nights hunched over a desk doing freelance design work for clients in different time zones. Some nights I was still working close to midnight while the rest of the house slept upstairs. There was no lock on the door because my father had replaced the original handle years ago with a cheaper one after the old knob broke. His exact words still stayed with me: "You don't need privacy from your own parents." That basement became my entire world for 6 long years. I woke up every morning to heavy footsteps overhead and heating vents so loud they sounded like machinery. Video meetings often felt impossible because the furnace kicked on like an airplane engine in the middle of conversations. But I tolerated all of it because the numbers made sense. No rent meant every extra dollar went directly into savings. Every uncomfortable moment felt temporary because I believed there was a finish line waiting for me. Above my desk, I pinned a printed condo listing to a corkboard. It showed a modest one-bedroom place just outside downtown Columbus with hardwood floors and large south-facing windows. But there was one line in the listing that mattered more than everything else. Private entrance. Your own keyed lock. I highlighted those words in yellow and read them every single day. Some people hang motivational quotes on their walls. I stared at a sentence about a deadbolt. To most people, it was just a feature in a property listing. To me, it represented peace, control, and finally having boundaries. At the time, I believed the lock was the goal. I just didn't realize someone else still had access to the key. I never planned to move back home at 27. Life pushed me there after the marketing agency where I worked lost its biggest client and laid off several employees in one short meeting. Within weeks, my roommate moved away, bills piled up, and my apartment became impossible to afford alone. My parents offered the basement casually, as if it were a short-term favor that would last only a few months. I accepted because I thought I had no other option. At first, I freelanced from a folding table while rebuilding my career. Eventually, I landed a senior design position at a firm downtown. By then, I could have moved out, but every month the savings account kept growing larger. 14,000 became 30. 30 became 55. The more the number climbed, the harder it became to walk away from the plan. The account itself had existed since I was 17 years old. My mother's name remained attached because she helped open it when I got my first part-time job. Over the years, I never considered removing her access. She never touched the account before, never questioned the balance, and never acted interested in the money. So I trusted her. Every deposit came directly from my paychecks. 72 monthly deposits over 6 years. Every overtime project, every skipped dinner outing, every extra freelance logo was sitting inside that account. Looking back now, I realize trust can disappear much faster than money. Growing up, my younger brother Tyler always seemed to shine brighter inside our family. His achievements were celebrated loudly while mine quietly passed by unnoticed. When he succeeded, the entire family gathered around him. When I succeeded, the moment usually ended with a polite smile and a quick subject change. When Tyler graduated high school, my parents rented tents, hired music, and invited dozens of people for a giant celebration. When I graduated college with honors, my mother dropped off a casserole dish and promised we would celebrate properly another time. That celebration never happened. Eventually, I stopped expecting one. My mother often repeated the same philosophy about family roles. In her mind, daughters handled responsibilities while sons carried the family legacy. Women adapted. Men were celebrated. She had grown up watching that dynamic in her own childhood, yet instead of breaking the cycle, she recreated it perfectly inside our home. Tyler himself was not cruel. In many ways, he was kind and thoughtful. But favoritism has a strange effect. The person receiving special treatment rarely notices the imbalance because from their perspective, everything feels normal. Then came the engagement. Tyler proposed to Brittany Vance at a winery during autumn while photographers captured every second among the falling leaves. Within days, wedding plans turned into a full-scale production. Brittany dreamed of white beaches, luxury resorts, and sunset ceremonies beside turquoise water. My mother immediately became obsessed with making it happen. Soon every family dinner revolved around Cancun. She spoke about welcome parties, beachside ceremonies, farewell brunches, and expensive honeymoon suites as if she were planning a celebrity event instead of a wedding. I smiled through all of it because Tyler genuinely seemed happy. But around that same time, my mother suddenly became very interested in my savings account. "How much have you saved now, Sam? You must be getting close. Still using the same account?" At the time, the questions felt harmless. I even mistook them for support. When I proudly told her the balance had crossed $91,000, she smiled warmly and called me responsible. For once, I actually felt seen. That feeling didn't last long. By April, the number finally reached $98,600. I remember the exact morning because I took a screenshot of the balance at 6:47 a.m. while sitting on the edge of my bed in the basement. That amount represented everything. The down payment, closing costs, furniture, and the beginning of a completely different life. I contacted my loan officer that same afternoon to finalize the next steps. She told me something I never forgot. Most people save for property. You saved for freedom. 2 weeks later, the transfer was scheduled. I even drove past the condo one last time that night just to look at it again. The windows glowed warmly against the evening sky, and for the first time in years, my future felt close enough to touch. Only 14 days separated me from finally owning a door that closed on my terms. Then my mother called. Her voice sounded unusually sweet, the kind of tone people use when they already know they are asking too much. She started talking about Tyler's wedding and how important family support was during major life moments. Then came the real message hidden underneath all the warm words. "Your father and I are helping where we can," she explained carefully. "But these weddings are expensive. Brittany's family has limits too. And honestly, Sam, you're single. You're flexible." That was the moment I realized my future had already been volunteered for someone else's celebration. "We thought maybe you'd help out a little." My mother said it so casually you would think she was asking me to bring snacks to a family picnic instead of handing over years of my life savings. Her voice carried that soft, practiced tone people use when they already expect you to say yes. I kept my answer calm. I'm happy Tyler's getting married, Mom, but that money is for my condo. The transfer happens in 2 weeks. The line went silent for a moment. Then she sighed dramatically. We're not asking for everything, Samantha. Just part of it. He's your brother. And that condo is my future, I replied. I've worked 6 years for it. Another pause settled between us. I could almost hear her disappointment hardening into judgment. Finally, I added something I had never said out loud before. I deserve a space that belongs to me too. That sentence seemed to bother her more than the refusal itself. After several seconds, she responded coldly. I hope you think carefully about what really matters. Then she ended the call. No goodbye. No love you. Just silence and the empty hum of the disconnected line. The conversation left a strange heaviness in my chest, but I convinced myself it was finished. She asked. I refused. End of story. At least that's what I believed. That night I buried myself in work until nearly midnight. The condo listing still hung above my desk like a promise waiting for me. I never bothered checking the banking app because I trusted the number sitting in that account. Or maybe I trusted my mother. A few days later, she brought the topic up again in the most indirect way possible. We were cleaning up after Sunday dinner while Tyler and Brittany talked excitedly about beach decorations and wedding playlists before heading home. My father sat in the other room half asleep in front of the television. My mother wiped down the kitchen counter and casually asked, That savings account is still the joint one from when you were younger, right? I nodded without thinking. Yeah. Why? Oh, nothing, she said lightly. I just realized you never changed it. Then she folded the dish towel neatly and added, Funny how some things stay exactly where they've always been. At the time, the comment barely registered. Later, I realized she wasn't making conversation. She was checking access. That should have been my warning sign, but after 6 years under the same roof, I had stopped questioning certain things. My mother had never touched the account before. Not once. Her name on it felt like an old technical detail nobody cared about anymore. I went downstairs that night exhausted. I remember lying awake staring at the ceiling while the furnace rattled overhead. For some reason, I couldn't shake the image of my basement door slowly opening by itself. Like someone had entered without permission. Around 3 a.m, I reached for my phone and almost checked the account. Something in me suddenly felt uneasy. But I convinced myself I was overreacting and put the phone back down. 11 days remained until the wire transfer. I believed the money was safe. What I didn't know was that the account was already being emptied piece by piece while I planned my future. Days later, I would learn the details from bank records and transaction logs. The first transfer happened on April 14th. $22,000 sent directly to a luxury resort company in Mexico. A few days later, another large payment covered airline tickets for wedding guests flying from Ohio to Cancun. Then came payments for entertainment packages, private dinners, decorations, upgraded suites, and expensive event services I could barely pronounce. Meanwhile, I was shopping for affordable towels and comparing paint colors online for a condo I thought I would soon own. I still remember standing in Target trying to decide between 2 shower curtains while thousands of dollars disappeared from my account in real time. The cruelty of that timing still makes my stomach turn. Every transaction was approved legally because my mother's name remained attached to the account. The bank never contacted me. No fraud alert. No warning notification. No phone call asking whether the withdrawals looked suspicious. That is how joint accounts work. Either owner can remove money at any time. Most people never learn that rule until it destroys something important. My mother understood it perfectly. Looking back, I think she always understood access better than boundaries. She knew where spare keys were hidden, where property lines ended, and exactly how far her authority stretched inside our family. She simply never viewed what she did as wrong. 2 days before the transfer deadline, my loan officer Janet called to confirm everything. Her voice sounded cheerful and excited. "Wednesday morning we send the wire," she said. "Then you officially begin closing." I could hear genuine happiness in her voice because she knew how hard I had worked for this moment. Janet once told me most clients viewed buying a home as a financial milestone. "You treat it like survival," she had said. She wasn't wrong. She reviewed the transfer instructions with me carefully and asked whether I planned to verify the balance one last time before Wednesday. I laughed and told her I trusted the account completely. That sentence would replay in my head for weeks. That evening, I drove past the condo again. The place looked quiet and ordinary beneath the streetlights, but to me it felt like freedom sitting behind brick walls and hardwood floors. The lockbox still hung from the front door. I remember staring at it and imagining the moment it would disappear. Soon there would be 2 keys inside my hand, both belonging to me alone. For 5 full minutes, I sat parked across the street imagining what peace might finally feel like. Then I drove back to the basement. I opened my laptop, answered emails, and went to sleep without checking the account. I wish I had. Wednesday morning arrived. At 9:02 a.m., I logged into my banking app with the routing information sitting beside my keyboard and Janet waiting for confirmation on standby. The screen loaded slowly. Then the balance appeared. $312.18. I stared at it without understanding. I refreshed the app once. Then again. Still $312.18. The room suddenly felt silent in a strange way, like my brain had muted the world while trying to process what I was seeing. I called the bank immediately. I barely remember the hold music. What I do remember is the representative's careful voice explaining that multiple withdrawals had been made over the previous 9 days by the secondary account holder, my mother. The representative politely asked whether I wanted the transactions listed one by one. 22,000. 11,000. 6,800. More transfers followed after that, each one larger than the last. Thousands upon thousands disappearing until almost nothing remained. Every transaction had been approved legally. Every payment carried my mother's authorization. I asked if the transfers could be reversed. No. I asked whether the bank had attempted to contact me. They had not. Apparently they were not required to. When the call ended, I sat frozen at my desk while the condo listing stared back at me from the corkboard wall. Private entrance. Your own keyed lock. The sentence suddenly looked ridiculous. Like hope printed on paper. Nearly $100,000 vanished in just over a week. Not because of fraud. Not because of criminals. Not because of a scam. My own mother had drained the account to finance my brother's luxury wedding. That evening, I drove to my parents' house without warning anyone first. My mother stood in the kitchen arranging cheap grocery store flowers in a glass vase. She looked completely relaxed, humming softly as though nothing unusual had happened. When she saw me, she smiled. "Mom," I said, "where is the money?" Not anger. Not shouting. Just direct and steady. She barely reacted. Instead, she adjusted the flowers and calmly told me to sit down. "I don't want to sit down," I answered. "I want to know where $98,000 went." She folded her arms and finally looked at me seriously. "It's family money, Samantha." The sentence sounded rehearsed, polished smooth from repetition inside her own mind. As though she had already justified everything long before I walked through the door. I reminded her the account contained 6 years of my income, direct deposits from my own work, every dollar earned personally. She dismissed the explanation with a wave of her hand. "Your brother found someone special," she said. "This wedding matters. Your house can wait." That was the moment something changed permanently inside me. Not because she took the money. Because she truly believed she had the right to. There was no guilt in her expression. No shame. No hesitation. In her mind, daughters were expected to sacrifice quietly while sons received the spotlight. She had built her entire view of family around that idea. And suddenly I understood there was nothing left to argue about. You cannot reason with someone who has turned your future into a family contribution. So I left. I drove back to the basement, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and instead of crying, I opened a spreadsheet. My father found me in the kitchen nearly 2 hours later. I had finally come upstairs for water after sitting alone in the basement trying to process everything. He stood at the sink rinsing the same coffee mug over and over again. That was one of his habits whenever he wanted to avoid a difficult conversation. He would keep his hands busy so he never had to say what he actually felt. The water kept running while he stared out the window like a man hoping somebody else would solve the situation for him. Finally, without turning around, he spoke quietly. "Sam, we'll figure something out." I waited for more. Maybe an apology. Maybe anger. Maybe even one honest sentence defending me. Nothing came. Upstairs, I could hear my mother walking through the hallway. The moment her footsteps crossed overhead, my father stiffened slightly. He shut off the water, dried his hands carefully on a towel he had already folded twice, and walked out of the kitchen without meeting my eyes. That was the closest he ever came to standing up for me. One unfinished sentence and a clean mug. I remember leaning against the counter afterward realizing something important. Pain changes shape when it stays too long. At first, I felt shocked. Then hurt. But slowly, something colder and sharper replaced both emotions. Precision. I stopped thinking emotionally and started thinking clearly. I wanted every detail documented. Every transfer. Every message. Every invoice. Every date. People imagine revenge as screaming matches and broken furniture. Mine started quietly beside a kitchen sink with a simple decision. I was going to remember everything. That night I returned to the basement, opened my laptop, and created a folder on my desktop. I named it Receipts. It felt accurate. 2 weeks before the wedding, we gathered again for Sunday dinner. My mother made roast chicken and used the expensive glasses because Brittany was there. Whenever guests visited, she performed the role of perfect family matriarch like an actress stepping onto a stage. Everything looked normal on the surface. Tyler joked with relatives. Brittany talked excitedly about wedding decorations. My father nodded along quietly from the corner while television noise drifted in from the other room. I carried my plate to the sink and reached for a glass of water when I noticed my mother's phone sitting on the kitchen counter. The screen was still awake. Unlocked. A group conversation was open. The title read, Tyler and Britt Wedding Plans. There were 4 members inside the chat. My mother. My father. Tyler. Brittany. Not me. I had never even known the conversation existed. The newest message immediately caught my attention. It had been sent by my mother several days before the first withdrawal from my account. Sam never checks that account. We'll move the money before she notices. For a second, I honestly thought I had misunderstood what I was reading. Then I saw Brittany's response underneath. That's between you and her anyway. Below that was a message from my father asking, "Are we sure this is a good idea?" My mother replied almost instantly. "It's already handled." I stood frozen beside the sink holding a glass of water while the rest of the family laughed only a few feet away. Tyler was telling a story about one of his friends. Brittany smiled across the table. My mother looked up and noticed me standing there. She smiled warmly. I smiled back. Then I quietly pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of every message on the screen. One by one. Every screenshot. Every timestamp. Every response. I scrolled through 6 weeks of conversations while pretending nothing was wrong. 47 messages documenting the entire plan in careful detail. By the time I finished, my hands had stopped shaking completely. I set the phone exactly where I found it, returned to the table, and finished dinner like nothing had happened. That was the moment I stopped reacting emotionally. I started building a case. Later that night, under the dim basement light, I reviewed the screenshots slowly. The conversation revealed everything my mother never intended me to know. The plan began before I even reached my savings goal. My mother had written that Tyler's wedding deserved to be perfect and mentioned that my account contained more than enough money to cover the costs. Not family savings. Not shared funds. My account. She understood exactly whose money it was. Brittany responded with vendor estimates for the resort, flights, decorations, entertainment packages, and luxury upgrades. The projected total came dangerously close to the exact amount sitting in my account. My father questioned the idea only once before going silent. Tyler, meanwhile, seemed completely unaware. His messages focused on seating charts, tuxedo fittings, guest lists, and honeymoon planning. Whenever he thanked my parents for their generosity, my mother repeated the same lie. We've been saving for years. Reading those words made something click into place. Tyler wasn't the architect of this betrayal. He was another person being manipulated by the story my mother created. He believed his parents were sacrificing for him out of love. In reality, they sacrificed me. That distinction mattered. The next morning, I requested 6 full years of bank records. When the statements arrived, the package weighed several pounds. I spread every page across my desk like evidence in a financial investigation. Then I built a master ledger. Column 1. Deposit dates. Column 2. Amounts. Column 3. Source. Every single deposit came from the same place. My payroll account. Not $1 came from my mother. Not $1 came from my father. 72 direct deposits. 6 years of work. Completely traceable. I formatted everything neatly because details matter. Even devastated, I still couldn't bring myself to create an ugly document. That part of me remained intact. After that, I matched every wedding invoice to the corresponding withdrawals from the account. Resort payments. Flight bookings. Open bar packages. Luxury suite upgrades. Photography services. Decorations. Every dollar removed from my future had been transformed into wedding expenses. I matched them line by line, clipped together the invoices and bank statements, and organized everything chronologically. Some people yell when they are angry. I organize spreadsheets. A coworker eventually recommended an attorney named Nathan Webb who specialized in financial disputes. His office sat inside an old brick building downtown between an accounting office and a dentist clinic.